أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين. So till now we have completed our introductory discussions. Inshallah, we continue and we come to the actual topic which we had intended for this series, and that is the collaboration and the cooperation between the Shias and the Sunnis in Islamic history. But before I get into the topic which I want to discuss today, I would like to clarify and make some points to clarify on this. I would like to clarify some issues before I get into my discussion for today. Point number one, and that's important, I thought I have to clarify because some questions might come up, and I thought I clarify it, is this: that what I'm going to discuss today, and Allah knows my intention, that I'm not discussing this to create controversies or arouse sensitivities, okay? Rather, the purpose is because this topic is so much related, rather it's fully related to the topic which we are discussing, okay? So if we can find some kind of solution in this topic, then there's a very greater chance of collaboration and cooperation within the Ummah, okay? That is number one. Issue number two, now this is an issue which we are facing in within Muslim scholarship, and that is the issue of, first of all, and this is an issue which is also coming from the Western academia also, where they are telling us this, that the Muslim scholarship's history is narrated with a lot of theological biases. It was narrated with biases, and we are reading the texts also with biases and with our theological lens on, okay? So a Shia reads history as a Shia, a Sunni reads history as a Sunni. Rather, what was supposed to be done, now this is where difference of opinion within scholars come in, that should we separate history from theology and present history separately, what they call intellectual history, okay? So should history be separated altogether and then theological discussion should be brought in, or no? Theology and history should be studied together, okay? So what I'm calling for is the first one, sorry, that history should be separated from our theology. We should be reading, we should first have the history, okay? And then we should come and study it theologically. Now, notice what is happening is that when you study history with the biases, look at what's happening today. We're going through this Gaza war today. If there was no clips and videos and pictures coming from Palestine and Gaza, I don't think so. We would have also bought into the narrative which the Zionists and the Israelis want to give us, the Hasbara, which they call it. This propaganda is really, so they're not narrating history. The Western media also is not narrating history, rather it's narrating it with biases and with their presumptions in it, okay? And the suffering is what we are going through today. That there's a world now divided where children are being killed and massacred, hospitals are being bombed, and still we are thinking that is this within international law or not, or is this a massacre or not, or this is a genocide or not, okay? This is where we have gone through. Why? Because the narratives are being mixed with the biases which are there. So what I'm calling for is, in today's discussion, is that what we need to do is study our own historical understanding, historical text. Rather, what we do is at times, even with the Quran, okay? This is what Allama Tabatabai cries in Al-Mizan, that when we're reading the Quran, also we are reading with these biases, okay? Rather than asking the Quran to tell us what to believe in, we go to tell it what to tell us what we should believe in, yeah? So this is exactly what's happening in history also. So what I'm calling for is for us to reread, to reevaluate, to re-understand history without these biases, okay, and without wearing this theological lens, okay? This is number two. Number three is the whole issue of, so for those of you who know me personally, they know me. For those of you who don't know me, at least by this time you have heard these few lectures of mine, you will have noticed I'm very pro-unity. I am very pro somebody who believes in collaboration and cooperation between different groups and sects and different strands. Rather, I'm proposing for cooperation within humanity. Okay, a day which I want to see that. But not at the expense of butchering and slaughtering haqq, the truth, and evidences. Okay, I will always give preference to haqq and the truth over this unity. So unity should not be given the preference, rather haqq should be given the preference. What we should do is, when we have found unity, we should unite on haqq and the truth which we have found with evidences, not because of our biases. Okay, now if we fail to unite here, then we agree to disagree then. Okay, that's the only way forward for the sake of the ummah. Then we agree to disagree and we move forward. Okay, and this is why I'm looking for a day. That day, inshallah, should come, that with different strands, people from different strands, from different group, Shias and Sunnis come and research together. Okay, when they come and research and collaborate together, work together, then the results will be even better. Unity will be able to achieve even further. Okay, this was number three. Point number three. Point number four, I would like to mention it as a disclaimer that those who cannot think out of the box, those who don't intend to research further, this lecture is not for you. Okay, so I would say until here, you've listened, switch off, and this lecture is not for you. It's for people who want to research further. This is exactly what I'm trying to give the message in this discussion for today. Okay, now let's come to let me share the slides and then come to discuss. So the first thing I want to discuss before we get to the actual topic which I want to discuss is this issue of biases. And again, I'm enforcing on this issue that we should read these issues without our biases. Look at where biases take us to. Give you 2-3 examples. I've taken these examples from Ibn Jawzi's Al-Mawdu'at. Ibn Jawzi is a famous Sunni scholar who has written this famous book of his Al-Mawdu'at, who has compiled, according to him, those narrations which he believes are fabricated. Now notice, he starts by saying, قَدْ تَعَصَّبَ قَوْمٌ. Okay, this biases. So those who claim, so he says that there's some of those who claim that they follow the Sunnah. That means the Sunnis. But what do they do? فَوَضَعُوا لِأَبِي بَكْرٍ فَضَائِلٍ. They end up fabricating narrations and merits of the first caliph. Okay, because of this love, they end up fabricating. Now, the same thing within the Shias, also with the Ghalis. Now, strangely, it's with the Shias only being accused of. Maybe the possibility is because the Sunnis ended up writing books on al-Mawdu'at, which the Shias didn't write it. Now, there is a movement which some scholars are going through. So this was one group, people who fabricate narrations in the virtues. The second group of people, of those who opposed the Shias, according to Ibn Jawzi, the Rafida, I don't know why they use this word. Those who intended to oppose the Shia, they ended up using these fabricated narrations in the merits of Ali alayhi salam to oppose the Shias now. Okay, this is exactly what the polemical scholars and speakers are doing. They present Shiism as things which some of the speakers mentioned, and they said this is Shiism. Okay, this is what Shias are promoting, rather than looking at the whole scholarship. Ibn Jawzi says both of them are in error. Okay, this is example number one. Example number two Ibn Jawzi gives is the Fada'il and the merits of Muawiyah. Okay, so he says, and again, he says that there are some who claimed, to follow the Sunnah. That means they were Sunnis, became biased to a level that they fabricated hadith in praise of Muawiyah. Why? To provoke the Shi'as. See where and where it reaches these biases. This is what I'm trying to show, okay? And this is what I'm trying to call for, that the need to empty ourselves from these biases. That a person can, just for the sake of, because I don't agree with this group, I will end up doing things and ascribe it to the Prophet ﷺ in the name of my love for him. God knows where it reaches. Now, Ibn Jawzi says that some of the Shias then also, out of their bias, ended up fabricating narrations in condemnation of Muawiyah. Okay, now, is this right or not? I want to pause here for a moment. And I would say that this statement is not correct altogether. Okay. Look, and this is not me saying it, it's Sunni scholars saying it. So I want to quote Imam Nasa'i. Now, before I quote him, I would like to share some statements. This is a question I have been asking myself. Anybody who studies the Rijal and Hadith of Sunnis, this is a question you ask, that how come Bukhari and Muslim were given preference over other scholars who are more scholarly than these two? And this is not me saying it, the scholars are saying it. Okay, so look at the example. This is Ibn Kathir, quoting it from Hakim, Nishapuri, quoting it from Dar Qutni. These are all giants within the Sunni world. Notice, Dar Qutni says that Imam Nasa'i was superior to all those renowned in the field of hadith during his time. Now, he was contemporary with Bukhari and Muslim. The second, you see, he was living in the 3rd and 4th century. And you have Imam Bukhari and Muslim living in the 3rd century. They were contemporary. Okay, now how come these two were given preference over this one while he was more superior to them? Rather, Ibn Kathir says that he was lin nisa'i. He's quoting a scholar. He says lin nisa'i shartun fil rijal ashaddu min shart Muslim. Okay, Nisa'i was more rigorous in his rijali methodologies than Imam Muslim or Sahih Muslim, and still the preference. I don't know why. Yeah. So he goes on further by saying he is without dispute the Imam in Hadith, Imam Nasa'i. Okay. Imam Subki then says that Imam Nasa'i had a stronger memory than Imam Muslim. So for those of you who know the classical hadith of especially the Sunnis, because they relied more on oral tradition rather than the written tradition. So this is where memory was everything for them. Okay. Now he's saying, Imam Subki, that Imam Nasa'i was even more stronger in retaining of memory than Imam Muslim. And still the preference was given. Rather, I would say even till from Bukhari also. Bukhari was somebody who used to do a lot of naql bil ma'na and paraphrasing. Okay, he would listen to hadith in one place and then quote the hadith in some other place. And this is where the Sunni scholars themselves say that he used to do naql bil ma'na and paraphrase the hadith because he couldn't remember the exact words. Okay, so now this same Imam Nasa'i, now look at what he says about Muawiyah. Okay, now the question is this: that did the Shias make up riwayats in condemnation of Muawiyah or no? The Sunnis themselves accept that the Prophet himself said it. Okay, look at what he said. What happens? Imam Nasa'i goes to Damascus, Sham, Syria. He had already written the book Khasa'is al-Ali. Okay, he had written the book about the merits of Imam Ali alayhi salam and the virtues of Imam Ali. Now, when he goes to Damascus, where there's inclination towards the Umayyads and Muawiyah, so they turn back to him and tell him that, can you please tell us the virtues of Muawiyah? So he turns back to them and says, I do not know of any virtue from him except the hadith of the Prophet, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, that la ashba Allahu batnahu, that may Allah not fill his stomach. Okay, and this is exactly what history narrates, that Muawiyah would eat and eat and he would not get satiated. Yeah, and they couldn't tolerate these wordings of his, and again, as normal, they end up beating him to the level that it results into his death. Okay, so the point I'm trying to make is that it wasn't Shi'as who made up riwayats in his condemnation. It was, okay, Imam Nisa'i says the Prophet himself said it, condemned him. Okay, rather the hadith or the famous hadith of the Prophet telling Ammar taqtuluk al-fi'atul baghiya. Baghiya was referring to, this was the Prophet saying it in regards to Muawiyah and his group. Okay. Ibn Jawzi himself then goes on further by saying that we don't have authentic narrations from the Prophet regarding the virtue of Muawiyah. Now, unfortunately, there's a movement within some in the Sunni world to promote now Muawiyah as a role model politician. Okay, he's being presented as a role model for politicians. God forbid we see that day. God forbid we see that day. Okay, and you notice that for those of you following up, there was a series released by the Saudi. The whole month of Ramadan, the Muslims wasted the 30 days by watching the series of Muawiyah. The scholars are telling you there are no virtues about him, and these people are making a 30-day series about him with a huge budget. Why? To promote him as a politician who is a role model. Because other politicians like Imam Ali were failures according to the current politicians, God forbid, you know. So Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal quotes also this. He says that his son says this. I asked my father that, what do you say about Ali and Muawiyah? So the son says the father stayed quiet for a while, and then he turned back to me and he says that the enemies looked for defects in Ali alayhi salam. They couldn't find any. That's how they ended up. Because they couldn't find defects in Ali, they ended up making up riwayats and fabricating riwayats in favor of those who opposed Ali alayhi salam, including Muawiyah. You see where it reaches, yeah, these biases. Okay, this is where it takes us to. Now, I'm sorry I'm going into a tangent, but I believe it's important for us to discuss this. One of the issues which the Shias discuss is the issue of theological infallibility. So they discuss infallibility from a theological perspective. Now, Sunnis differ on this. They don't accept it. There's some within the Shias also, they don't accept it. We respect their opinion. What I'm trying to propose is this opinion, okay? This whole issue of the enemies looking and searching for defects within Imam Ali alayhi salam and couldn't find any. And this is something Ibn Hajar Asqalani also narrates this. Okay, that they looked for defects and flaws within him, but they couldn't find any. Okay, so what I'm proposing now, this angle of historical infallibility. So you disagree with theological infallibility? No worries. Let's explore this whole issue of theological infallibility. Okay, and let's see where it reaches. Rather, Imam Ali alayhi salam himself discusses this. So this statement is there in Nahj al-Balagha, also is there also in Sheikh Saduq's Kamaluddin also. So Imam Ali in Sheikh Saduq's hadith, he says, Imam Ali says that the Prophet told me that lam yakun li ahadin fika mahmaz. Okay, so the Prophet is using three words. One is mahmaz, one is maghmaz, and one is hawada. The Prophet is telling the Prophet Imam Ali that they will not find in you mahmaz, any faults. Okay, they want to slander you, they can, but they will not find faults in you. They can, the maghmas, the faults and criticism, no faults in you. And hawada, meaning that you are somebody who is not lenient when it comes to, there's no leniency being shown, there's no compromising when it comes to the law of God. Imam used to act upon it up to the dot. You get me? Okay. So, and this is something Imam himself discusses in sermon number 37, which we'll discuss further, where he says, no one can find fault or speak ill of me. Okay, this is something Imam himself discusses. So this is an area of exploring of historical infallibility. Okay, so what I was discussing was the biases, the need to remove our biases when we are studying historical narratives, and even further than that, the Quran. Now, the topic which I want to discuss for today is the whole issue of Bayáh. Pledge of allegiance is an issue which is sensitive within Shias and Sunnis. Okay, and the reason is because we approach these issues with our presumptions, which we come to it. Now, the other issue which I will not be discussing, but it's somehow related to the topic of collaboration and cooperation, is the issue of futuhat, okay, the Muslim conquests. Now, there's a need for a huge research out there, which again, because of personalities involved, there's not enough research happening. Okay, so when it comes to the issue of Bay'ah and Pledge of Allegiance, what I'm proposing, I'm not going to present my opinion, nor is my opinion going to have an effect on such a sensitive matter if scholars have not had an effect. What I'm proposing is this, that there's a need for research, re-research, okay? There's a need for reassessment of the evidence out there, okay? That's the whole thing I'm proposing. And I will be just discussing this whole issue of Bay'ah. You will notice I'll discuss it chronologically. So you will see how historical narratives change with time. Okay? And this is where the need for research and re-evaluation. And I'll be presenting then the scholarly opinions of the Shias and the Sunni scholars. Okay? Now, let's start. In the year 207 Hijrah, this is early 3rd century, we have a historian by the name of Waqidi. Waqidi was a person who was working with the Abbasids, so I don't want to promote him. But what I'm trying to say is this, that Waqidi, the strange thing what I see with Sunni hadith is here, and this was the muhaddithin, this was the issue with the muhaddithin and the traditionalists, whoever they differed with, so somebody who didn't follow their methodology, okay, they quickly condemned and they considered them not trustworthy. So all historians, Ibn Ishaq, Ibn Hisham, okay, Waqidi, okay, you have the famous, the one who has narrated Karbala, ya Allah, I forget his name. Right. The name comes in, I will mention him also. He is also considered as weak also, okay? You will notice they consider all the historians as, they don't authenticate them. This is an issue which needs to be studied also. And again, that's not the topic for today. Inshallah, some other time also, we will study him. Now, what's interesting about Waqidi is here. Waqidi was a teacher of Ibn Sa'd. Ibn Sa'd, the author of Tabaqat, the famous Tabaqat. He's the teacher of Ibn Sa'd. Ibn Sa'd is authenticated by the Muhaddithin and considered as trustworthy. But his teacher from whom he takes majority of the content is considered weak and considered not trustworthy. This is the irony we are going through. Okay, now that's not our discussion. Inshallah, some other time when we're discussing history, we will be able to discuss this. Now, look at what Waqidi is saying now. This is early 3rd century. He says that Abu Bakr turned back to Imam Ali alayhi salam when people had pledged allegiance to him. Imam Ali somehow disputed. Okay, he disputed and he didn't want to give allegiance to him. So Abu Bakr turns back to him and tells him that if I knew that you would dispute on this matter, then I would have not pursued this matter at all. Okay, shows that there was some kind of dispute within the two. The reason I'm mentioning is because later you will see some scholars mentioning it as if everything was flowery and mutually they used to respect each other. Okay, so then Abu Bakr leaves Imam Ali alayhi salam and allows him to return without giving the Pledge of Allegiance. And then Waqidi gives 3 opinions. He says either the Pledge of Allegiance was given after the death of Bibi Fatima alayhi salam, after 75 days after the death of Fatima, or 6 months later. 3 opinions. Can you see the contradictory narrations now? This is Waqidi. Come to Imam Bukhari. Okay, Imam Bukhari in his Sahih Bukhari says that Imam Ali, after the death of Bibi Fatima, now lost the respect of the people, and thus he said, now I want to reconcile. And thus he comes and gives Bay'ah. So the Bay'ah happened after the death of Fatima alayhi salam. Okay, this is second opinion, and this is going Bukhari. Ibn Qutayba, again, a Sunni scholar in later 3rd century, 276 Hijrah. So there's a movement going on now that they want to say that this book of Ibn Qutayba, Al-Imama wa Siyasa, was not his book. Now, that's not our discussion. I'm just quoting it so that you come and understand the chronological narratives. Yeah. He says that Abu Bakr and Umar have a discussion and a conversation where Umar is forcing Abu Bakr to take bay'ah from Imam Ali alayhi salam. But Abu Bakr turns back to Umar and says that I will not force unto him anything until Fatima alayhi salam is alive. So we will not do anything until she is alive. Okay, the daughter of the Prophet, we respect her. We will not do anything. This is Ibn Qutayba. 3 years later, 279, comes Baladuri, again another Sunni historian in his famous Ansab al-Ashraf. where he says that now look at the change now. Okay, now Baladuri has quoted all these narrations. Somebody might come and say that, oh, he's just a historian quoting all the narrations. But I just want to show you that this is a narrative now which comes in the later 3rd century, that everything was mutual within the two, and there was so much respect. Rather, Imam Ali used to consider the virtues of Abu Bakr even at a higher level. Look at what he quotes. He says that Abu Bakr, after being given bay'ah by the people, he comes to the people and talks to the people and tells them that I release my bay'ah from you. So if you want to release your bay'ah, no worries. Now this is where it says that Imam Ali alayhi salam says that wala wallahi la nuqiluka wala nastaqiluka. We will not abandon you. Okay, we will not revoke you. The pledge we have given to you, we are not going to abandon it and we're not going to revoke it. Why? The reason now is being given. It's because the Prophet considered you somebody, you led the Salah at the time of the Prophet. He made you lead Salah, and that is why he gave you the preference, and that is why we are not going to abandon you also. This is one narrative Ibn Baladuri gives. The second narrative he gives is the same 6 months narrative. The third narrative which he gives is the whole issue of he says that the Pledge of Allegiance happened when the time of the Ridda Wars. Now, the whole issue of the Ridda Wars and the whole issue of apostasy after the Prophet, it requires research. There's a lot of research to be done there. Again, the biases and the sensitivities don't make us get into the discussions very frankly out there. So, Baladuri says at that time, Uthman came to Ali alayhi salam for help because now the people who had apostate, who has become murtad, now they wanted to attack Medina. So he comes and asks for help, that you need to help us fight them. So Uthman then tells Ali alayhi salam that you have not given bay'ah till now. So they talk to each other, they convince each other, and somehow Imam Ali then goes to give bay'ah. When he gives the bay'ah, this is where the Muslims now get happy, and this is where now they get ready for going for the expeditions and this military expedition. Okay, this is the third narrative of Baladuri. Yaqubi, the end of 3rd century, he's a Shia now. He comes and after discussing all the historical issues, he believes that Imam gave bay'ah. The only difference is when did he give bay'ah? Was it 6 months later, or now he adds 40 days? That's another narrative which is coming in now. Okay, the 40-day narrative. So that bay'ah was given 40 days later. This is Yaqubi. Then you have the famous Tabari. In early 4th century, 310 Hijrah. So now, here is another narration now, and a narrative coming in, a bit of force and a bit of persistence coming in. So when people gave allegiance to Abu Bakr, Ali and Zubayr refused to give a bay'ah. And then there's a whole talk about swords and all that, which I will not get into. So Omar turns back to Ali alayhi salam and them, both of them, and tells them that you will pledge allegiance willingly or unwillingly. There's some kind of force and some kind of persistence going on, and we'll see this coming further very clearly. Okay, and then once this was done, this kind of force was done, and they pledged the allegiance. This is one narrative Tabari gives. The other narrative Tabari gives is a very strange narrative, and this is what I'm trying to show you. Look at the evolution of these narratives. Ali alayhi salam was so much in shock he was so much anxious to give bay'ah that he just wears a one piece of shirt and forgets to wear even his other outer garment and all whatnot, and he's running towards the masjid to give bay'ah and pledge of allegiance. Okay, so notice it says he pledged allegiance, and then he sat with him, and then he sent somebody to bring his outer garment, and then he wore it. That's how much he was anxious to give bay'ah. Then Tabari gives another narrative, is that the same 6 months narrative. Okay, then you have Ibn Atham, 314 Hijrah, again early. Now, Ibn Atham, Shias would consider him Sunnis, Sunnis would consider him Shias. Allah, this is another issue which we are having within history. Now, I don't want to get into that. The same narrative that Abu Bakr tells Imam Ali alayhi salam that if I knew that you would dispute on this issue, I would not come and force you and pursue on this matter. And Imam leaves, and he's been given the opportunity to leave without giving the pledge. Then he says, now, some narrators say that he gave allegiance 2.5 months after the passing away of Fatima. Now, can you see this? This is another narrative now coming in, 75 days later. Okay, some, including Al-Mu'mineen Aisha, say allegiance was done 6 months later after her passing away. Okay, so this is Ibn Atham. Now, you come to a Shia text, Sheikh Kulaini. Now, this is another narrative which is being now proposed, and this is something which the Shia scholars also propose this theory, that Bayáh mukrahan, he gave bay'ah but forcefully. Now, here he gives the reason, and we'll see another reason as we go further, that he gave allegiance reluctantly because he didn't have supporters. Okay, so this whole issue of now giving bay'ah forcefully and reluctantly comes in. Mas'udi, again, another figure who is the Shias would consider him Sunni. Sunnis again would consider him as a Shia. Okay, so he quotes a kind of a dispute, and there's a talk which goes on between Ali alayhi salam and Abu Bakr. And he goes on saying, he adds one more thing now, that Sa'ad bin Ubadah left without pledging allegiance. So there's another person now being added. That Sa'ad bin Ubadah also didn't pledge allegiance, and he went to Syria. Okay, this is important as we go further. Okay, so he says that none of the Banu Hashim, so the list now is increasing. So it was Ali, Zubair, Sa'ad bin Ubadah. Now you have the Banu Hashim now. They didn't give bay'ah until after the death of Fatima alayhi salam. Okay, then he quotes other opinions. He says there's an opinion that 10 days after the death of Fatima, 70 days after the Prophet's death. Okay, so then some say 3 months later, some say 6 months, and some other opinions. Okay, now we come to Sheikh Saduq. Now this is the late 4th century. The reason I'm quoting this is where I would say that Shia scholars need to come up and understand and reevaluate these ahadith. Okay, these kind of texts. So this is a hadith which is a long hadith. When Imam Hassan alayhi salam gave bay'ah, when Imam Hassan did sulh and did the peace treaty with Muawiyah, some of the people, God forbid, criticized him for what he did. Okay, now when the criticism came in, Imam had to explain himself that why he did what he did. So he gives the example of Musa and Khidr and the philosophies hidden behind it. And now I don't want to get into that. But one of the statements which is related to our issue is this. Imam mentions the statement. He says, "Ma minna ahadun إلا ويقع في عنقه بيعة لطاغية زمانه إلا القائم." He's trying to give the reason and the philosophy of the ghaiba of the 12th Imam alayhi salam, that why is the 12th Imam is in ghaiba. So he says one of the reasons he's in ghaiba is because he doesn't need to give bay'ah to any ruler or any leader. But we Imams gave bay'ah to all the caliphs. Okay, some of them tyrannical also. We gave bay'ah to them, except the 12th Imam will not give bay'ah. Okay, can you understand this? So this hadith is showing that Imam is trying to say that all of us gave bay'ah to every ruler. So it's not only Imam Ali alayhi salam, but every Imam later. Okay, now the whole issue of Imam Hussein also comes in here, which needs a bit of study on this issue. Now, come 384 comes Bayhaqi. Now this is what I was saying, that this is the hadith of Sunnis. Notice the hadith of Bukhari, which says 6 months, or at least after the death of Bibi Fatima alayhi salam. Strangely, this is one of those areas where the Sunni scholars, they will keep aside Bukhari and Muslim here and take an opinion of another scholar. And this is where I come and say these biases come in. Okay, so Bukhari and Muslim all believed that the bay'ah didn't happen until the passing away of Bibi Fatima alayhi salam. Bayhaqi, he says that it happened straight away. Okay, and Sunni scholars, as we go further, you will notice that they give preference to this Abi Sa'id al-Khudri's hadith over that hadith of Bukhari. And this is not found in Bukhari, but they give preference to. Now, this is a question, again, they need to answer further then. So the hadith is like this, that Abu Bakr stood up to give a khutbah and a sermon, and he doesn't find Ali and Zubair within them. So he calls for them and says that, can you call them? I want to, he summons them and he calls them. And then he tells Ali alayhi salam, أَرَدْتَ أَن تَشُقَّ عَصَى الْمُسْلِمِينَ. Do you intend to divide the Muslims? And then Imam Ali alayhi salam turns back and says, no, there's no blame. La tathriba. Don't blame me, apparently. Ya Khalifata Rasulillah. Can you see the wordings now? Okay, this Khalifata Rasulillah also is now coming in. And fabaya'ahu, and then he gave bay'ah. Okay, this is Bayhaqi in the end of the 4th century. Then you come the early 5th century. This is where Sheikh Mufid comes in. He quotes different opinions. So one more opinion he quotes is the issue of 3 days. Okay, so those who believe that the bay'ah happened in 3 days, and some say it happened after the death of the Fatima, some say 40 days, and some say 6 months. He comes and mentions his opinion by saying that the Shia scholars believe that Imam Ali alayhi salam didn't give bay'ah at all. Now, is this a historical understanding, or this is a theological understanding? This is where research is needed now. Okay, but he's making his opinion very clear that Imam didn't give bay'ah even for a moment. Okay, this was Mufid. Now comes, say, Murtada Amili, the famous, is the Lebanese historian, just passed away some few years ago. He gives other opinions. So 40 days, we've heard of it. 72 days is a new opinion. And then 8 months is a new opinion also. Now, what I was trying to show is look at the different narratives with the different understandings. Okay, one shows you that there's a dispute, one shows you there's mutual understanding. One says Bay'ah happened very quickly, one says no, Bay'ah happened with some kind of force and all whatnot. One says no, it happened after so much time. All these contradictory narrations requires research again, re-evaluation again. Okay, now I'm not, as I said, I'm not going to mention my personal opinion. Okay, nor does it even matter on this issue at all. Now, let me quickly mention the opinions of the Shia scholars, and then I come to the Sunni scholars. So we mentioned Sheikh Mufid's opinion. So this is an opinion shared by a number of scholars within Shias, that Imam never gave bay'ah at all. No, not at all, even for a moment. This is one opinion. The second opinion is that the bay'ah was given out of force. So we studied Sheikh Kulaini's understanding. Another understanding is coming here now. I'm quoting Sayyid Sistani. Ayatollah Sistani, this is website attributed to him, and he approves this. So notice the way he puts forces. He's now interpreting force as something else. That was something we saw a bit partially in the discussion in Tabari. He says that the followers of the Caliph continued pressuring Imam Ali alayhi salam until, so the pressure was so much that Imam was forced now to give bay'ah. The force part is coming here. Now he gave a bay'ah in such a way that he didn't open his hand and gave bay'ah. Rather, he closed his hand, okay, with a clenched fist, and that's how he put the hand on top of Abu Bakr, and that's how he gave bay'ah. So Ayatollah Sistani's understanding is this, that this was a forced understanding. Rather, he goes further by saying this so-called allegiance came after threats to kill him. Can you see now? This is another type of force being introduced. And this is, he's taking it from Ibn Abil Hadid also. So he's not quoting Shia references, he's quoting Ibn Abil Hadid also. Okay, so the Mu'tazili scholar who now is being ascribed to be a Shia. I don't know how, while there's no proof for him to be any Shia. Okay. Sayyid Murtada Amili, the Lebanese historian which I mentioned, when he is now coming to the hadith of Sheikh Saduq, where the Imam Hassan alayhi salam had said that not all of us have given bay'ah to the tyrannical caliph. Okay, I'm sorry, I had a small glitch. Let me share the slide again. So we were discussing Sayyid Murtada Amili. When it comes to discussing Sheikh Saduq's hadith, that where Imam Hassan said that we all give bay'ah to the leaders and the caliphs except the 12th Imam. Notice he comes and says that certainly there's no doubt that what is meant is forceful allegiance. That means all Imams were forced to do allegiance. Okay, or it was an outwardly issue. So outwardly it appeared like bay'ah, but it wasn't a real bay'ah. Okay, referring to, for example, Imam Hassan's peace treaty. Okay, this is the second opinion. The third opinion is the scholars that's 3-4 scholars, I found their names. They say that no, Imam alayhi salam gave bay'ah, willingly gave bay'ah, but after looking at the situation. So the situation was this, that on one side was his khilafah, okay, on the other side was the issue of Islam, because the Muslims were starting to disunite, and then Islam would get hurt. So now they are proposing that Imam weighed these two things, and he said, my bay'ah is not important, my leadership is not important as Islam. And thus he ended up giving bay'ah to the caliphs. Okay, so they understand that Ayatollah Makarim, for example, understand this from the 37th khutbah and the sermon in Nahj al-Balagha. Very strangely, again, Imam has to justify the same way Imam Hassan alayhi salam had to justify. Now Imam Ali alayhi salam has to justify his understanding. Okay, so he starts praising himself. This was in Nahrawan, yeah? He starts praising himself, and then he says that, do you think I would lie regarding the Prophet of God? So someone now attributing lies to him. He's quoting the Messenger of God, and they are saying that you are lying. And now the Prophet, Imam Ali alayhi salam, has to justify to them that, do you think I will really lie and ascribe a lie to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi? Okay. Then he goes on to say that, but when I paused to reflect on my situation, I found that my obedience, that means my obedience to the Prophet had told me that when such a situation comes in, you have to choose Islam over your own leadership. So my obedience to the Prophet preceded my oath of allegiance. That means my leadership. Do you get me? Okay. So Ayatollah Makarim, for example, from this khutbah, he concludes by saying that if he quotes, he quotes Imam Ali alayhi salam, he says, if I pledge allegiance to the caliphs, it was not because I consider them more deserving. Okay, so Imam is considering himself more deserving, but he's pledging allegiance, he's giving bay'ah. Why? To prevent discord and division amongst Muslims. Now, notice where it goes to. Wallahi, this is where it hurts. That do you think I would falsely attribute these words to the Prophet? This is where some people become holier than thou. Okay, you become more imam than the imam himself. Okay, so Ayatollah Makarim then goes on to say that therefore Imam says I pledged allegiance to the caliphs and refrained from asserting my own right to leadership. And he then goes on to end by saying that this interpretation aligns more with the subsequent statements. Okay, so the siyaq and the context of the khutbah aligns with this understanding of Imam giving bay'ah and not the second opinion. The second opinion says that Imam kept quiet. The Prophet told him to keep quiet. When such situation comes in, no issue of bay'ah, but keep quiet only, okay, for the sake of Islam. Okay. This is Ayatollah Makarim. Okay, this was the second opinion which I mentioned. Muhaqqiq al-Khu'i, Habibullah Khu'i, is not Ayatollah Khu'i. Muhaqqiq al-Khu'i is the famous commentator of Nahj al-Balagha called Minhaj al-Bara'a. He quotes the second opinion. Okay. Now, come to the Sunni scholars and we finish, inshallah. So, very quickly, the first opinion is this, that they believe that eventually all gave bay'ah. Okay, this is the likes of Ibn Taymiyyah and Abu Hasan Ash'ari and other scholars also, that they believe that all the Sahaba and the companions, including Imam Ali alayhi salam and the Banu Hashim, gave bay'ah. Okay, so what happens to Sa'ad bin Ubadah? I don't know. Okay, this is a question which needs to be sorted. So now notice, Ibn Taymiyyah said that all pledged allegiance willingly. Can you see now he's trying to oppose that opinion of forceful allegiance. Okay, the same thing Abu Hasan Ash'ari also mentions, which I will not get into. The second opinion is bay'ah was given immediately. Okay, this is Ibn Kathir and a lot of scholars within the Sunni world propose this theory, relying on that Bayhaqi's hadith, which I quoted. Yeah, and this is a question now it comes in. Why give preference to Bayhaqi's understanding over? And you will come and see then how they reconcile in the fourth opinion. So the Pledge of Allegiance was given straight away. This is Ibn Kathir in his Bidayah wal Nihaya. He says the Pledge of Allegiance was given straight away, immediately. The first or the second day. Okay, now this is the picture they're proposing now. Can you see the narrative changing? Okay, this is the 7th, 8th century now. The picture being proposed is everything was flowery and everything was good between Imam Ali and the Banu Hashim and the caliphs. He says this is the truth. For Ali ibn Abi Talib never separated from Abu Bakr. Okay, now this is a reality or not, Allahu A'lam. This is where research requires, this is where the lens of theology needs to be taken out, okay? Nor did he ever cease to pray behind him in any congregational prayer, okay? So this is Ibn Kathir and a lot of scholars who propose this opinion of immediate giving bay'ah. Some scholars propose that no, they say that after 6 months, the bay'ah was given after 6 months. This is Ibn Athir in his Al-Kamil fi Tarikh. It's a famous book of Tarikh also. So I'm quoting from Usud al-Ghabba. He says that, notice now the list, he mentions the whole list, okay? Ali and Banu Hashim and Zubair and Khalid and Sa'ad ibn Ubadah. These are the ones who refrained from giving allegiance, okay, till the death of Bibi Fatima alayhi salam. When she died, then this all also gave bay'ah also, okay? Now, the final issue. So how do they now reconcile? Now this reconciliation is at all not understandable to me, but it's a kind of reconciliation they're proposing. That you have on one side hadith from Bukhari and Muslim telling you that the bay'ah was delayed at least till the death of Bibi Fatima alayhi salam. And then on one side you have Bayhaqi telling you from Abu Sa'id al-Khudri that the bay'ah happened straight. First or second day the bay'ah happened. So how do you reconcile? So Ibn Kathir, for example, again, he reconciles by saying that Imam Ali alayhi salam felt after the passing away of Bibi Fatima, he felt the need to come and renew the pledge. Now, why him only? Allah knows better. This is something which needs, again, researches again. He came to renew his pledge again, and that is why he gave. So he gave bay'ah then also, and notice he says that he had already given the bay'ah before the burial of the messenger. The second day, he gave the bay'ah. Okay. Now, why did he give it after 3 months or 6 months or whatever the time period? He's coming to renew the bay'ah now. What transpired that there was a need to renew this? Okay, these are the 4 opinions which are there within the Sunni world, which at least I could find them. Now, in conclusion, as I mentioned, that the purpose was not to give my opinion. The purpose was not, again, to create controversies or arouse sensitivities, but rather the purpose is to now ask and request for research in this area. And if we find and come to some kind of conclusion, then this is a very beautiful area for collaboration and cooperation between the Shias and Sunnis. Let's pray to Allah to give us the tawfiq to be able to unite our hearts, and Allah should help all the oppressed throughout the world especially the oppressed in Palestine and Gaza. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.